Young Jinfan woke up and realized that he had crossed over to become a pitiful village maid in another world. Even if her family is poor, she will still pick it up and raise it. Some people want to kill her mother and call her a wild seed. Hehe, it's okay, tidy up one by one. Poor people are honest, so they deserve to be suppressed and beaten. Get lost. See how she leads her parents to get rich, soar far away, and I have space in my hands. Unexpectedly, when she could really fly away, a handsome medicinal young man asked her pitifully, "Junior sister, what about me?" Young Jinfan shook his hand as he pinched the silver needle. Damn it, I forgot about this demon. Keywords of the novel. Crossing the farmhouse. Medical women's space burning to the sky. No pop-ups, crossing the farmhouse. The space for medical women burns to the sky. Download the complete set of TXT, travel through the countryside. The medical women's space burns to the sky. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Awakening from a Different World. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Awakening from a Different World. What should I do, big sister? She won't die, will she? How do I know? We just gave her a gentle push. This little bastard is used to pretending. She's bleeding a lot. What's the panic? She accidentally bumped into the corner of the table herself. Even if she dies, what does it have to do with us? So, how can we tell Uncle San when Dad and his team finish their work and come back later? Let's just say that. It was Nai who asked us to come and see her, so it's not our fault anyway. Uncle San is the most honest and filial. I don't believe he would hurt the harmony of the family for this little wild seed he picked up. But the third uncle usually protects her the most. That's because Uncle San didn't have any children, so he raised her as his own child. Otherwise, a small wild seed he picked up would be a loser. Who cares? But if she really dies, Uncle San is afraid he will make a scene. Don't be afraid, there's Milk around. Milk said, let's push the matter of Aunt San's miscarriage onto her, and Uncle San will only hate her. Okay, let's listen to the Milk. Two slightly tender and piercing female voices lingered in young Jinfan's ears, causing her head to buzz. She struggled to open her sour eyes, and the glaring white light made her frown and squint uncontrollably, causing her body to twist unnaturally. Hey, big sister, look. She's moving. The slightly older girl glanced coldly at young Jinfan, who had already opened her eyes and stared blankly at the beam of the house. She couldn't help but sneer, and her disdain was not concealed. Let me tell you what, this little wild creature is used to pretending. It looks quite similar. After a moment of confusion, young Jinfan felt a piercing pain coming from the back of his head, and fluid was frantically flowing out. The roar of young Jinfan. Jump, jump, and the intense explosion still lingered in her mind for a long time. Headache is splitting, and consciousness is gradually becoming clearer. Where is this? How could there be children's voices on a ship going out to sea? Then, she felt someone kick her leg hard. Little wild seed, why pretend to die? With such ability, why not really die? What did third uncle think? Picking up such a restless little wild seed like you, what a sin. Young Jinfan frowned even tighter, mechanically looking towards the sound source. Two young girls, about 8 or 9 years old, were looking at her from a high position. The slightly older girl had a look of annoyance and contempt in her eyes, while the younger girl had a hint of shyness on her face. The rest were no different from the older girl. Little wild seed, dare you stare at me? Believe it or not, I'll kill you. So you like to pretend to be dead, right? I'll make you pretend, let you pretend. After speaking, the big girl reached out and shouted on young Jinfan's face. Pop, pop. After 2 solid slaps, young Jinfan's confusion in his eyes had faded, replaced by shock and anger. On the face, there was a burning pain. Brain melon seeds are even more buzzing. Damn it. Where are these two little kids from? How dare they bully the old lady? How uncivilized. Young Jinfan sat up suddenly, looking at them with a calm face and a gloomy gaze. The two sisters were frightened back by her eyes. The big girl sneered when she saw that young Jinfan had not taken any further action, and then boldly walked forward. Oh, the little wild seed is amazing. Are you still not convinced? You're so disobedient and want to hit me. Look at your bear-like behavior, the mice in the pit are even bolder than you, the little wild seed. Young Jinfan clenched her lower lip and felt another piercing pain in her head. She stared blankly at the person in front of her, with a mouth that smelled even worse than a pit of feces chattering incessantly, but she didn't hear a word. Strange information surged through her mind one after another, like a parasite gnawing on her brain marrow, causing her to sweat in pain. Seeing her trembling, the two sisters thought that the words had played a role, and they were proud to go forward and slap her again. As soon as she stepped forward, young Jinfan on the ground suddenly rushed towards them. Before they could scream, young Jinfan lifted her foot and kicked her twice in a row. The two sisters were caught off guard and were kicked to the ground one by her fierce feet. Young Jinfan didn't give them a chance to calm down. She extended her left hand and grabbed the big girl's neck, then lifted it up, forcing her to look at her. The big girl instinctively reached out to break the hand that was pinching her neck in exchange for a chance to catch her breath, and the fear in her eyes was evident. The timid one next to him was even more frightened, with his hands propped up on the ground and his lips slightly parted, but he couldn't make a sound. Young Jinfan raised his lips slightly and quickly raised his right hand. Pop, pop. A crisp slap sounded, and the girl's cheeks on both sides swelled at a visible speed to the naked eye. Young Jinfan pushed her aside. After tidying up one, there's also the next one. Young Jinfan's body swayed, and another girl's fear intensified. Pop, pop. Two slaps fell again, and there was an extra pig head face. It's amazing. After slapping, she extended two fingers and poked the two bear kids a few times each. The two sisters rolled their eyes and fainted one after another. Young Jinfan stood up straight and took a long breath of relief. Whew! The world has finally become quiet. Dear friends, Yaoxiang is back again. Hehe, this new book released is originally titled The Soul of a Military Doctor. If you like it, remember to collect recommended tickets. Love you all. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Picked Up Children. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Picked Up Children. After tidying up the two bear kids, young Jinfan's legs softened and he sat on the ground with his head down. A self-deprecating smile appeared on the face. What was her luck when she encountered a missile on her first voyage with a ship? Despite jumping into the sea, he was still affected by the explosion and died young. Having lived for 27 years, my knowledge and reputation have almost reached their peak. Although I haven't gotten married and had children, and I can't see the old man at home again, I have no regrets. Die, just die. Unexpectedly, the heavens refused to let her achieve her wish and even brought her fashionable soul to this place where birds don't poop. Time travel is just about time travel. Can't we arrange a better identity for her based on her previous life of saving lives and helping the wounded, and her hard work and achievements? Young Jinfan was completely speechless, continuing to digest the surging information in his mind. She traveled to a dynasty that was not recorded in history books, and the owner of this body had the same name and surname as her. It was a child picked up and raised by Yang Laosan and his wife. That big girl's words may sound unpleasant, but she didn't say anything wrong. The original adoptive parents, Mr. and Mrs. Yang Laosan, have been married for over 3 years without any children. The couple met her, who was born less than a month ago, on their way back from seeking help. They felt pity and felt it was a gift from heaven, so they carried her back home. Yang Laosan and his wife regarded her as their own and loved her very much. The old lady of the Yang family, Wu Shi, is a serious patriarch. And Yang Laosan is the least likable among the 4 sons of the Yang family. Coincidentally, the third daughter.in-law Wang was also picked up by Yang Laosan. The family couldn't afford to raise a sick and idle person for free, so she took the initiative to let Yang Laosan marry her without spending a penny on the dowry. The old lady of the Yang family looks down on this third daughter.in-law from the bottom of her heart. Although she saved her some dowry money, it's not easy to have children. She always looks like a delicate and weak young lady, which makes her annoyed. The old lady of the Yang family sees the original owner as a thorn in her side and a thorn in her flesh. In front of her third son, she is not easily affected and can only secretly poke and vent her anger on the original owner. So even if the original owner had the love of his parents, he only suffered a lot of abuse in the dark. Cousins and sisters bullied her even more recklessly, saying that she was a wild child nobody wanted, and they would beat or scold her. In addition, the original owner himself was a gentle person, unable to fight back or scold back. After being bullied, he only trembled and huddled alone in the corner, wiping tears. There's no way, the original owner was the youngest one in the family, still picked up. Other younger generations looked down on her and didn't even treat her as their younger sister. Instead, they saw her as their enemy fighting for food. They picked up a group to bully the original owner, pushing her to do all the dirty and tiring work. If they couldn't finish it or didn't do it well, they would be beaten. If they dared to resist, they would only get beaten even more severely. Over time, the original owner became a timid and silent person. And the father of the original owner was extremely honest and filial. The fact that he had no children made him unable to hold his head up in front of his parents and brothers. The family was already so poor that it was almost unbeatable. He picked up another child and came back, still a young girl. It was strange that his mother could give him a good face. In order to make the family accommodate the original owner, Ang Laosan worked the most vigorously, and he did most of the work in the field. He gets up early and goes dark every day, eating the simplest food and doing the most tiring work. The heavens have eyes. Not long ago, Wang suddenly fainted. Yang Laosan anxiously held his wife and went to find the doctor in the east of the village. A doctor's pulse diagnosis is a good thing. Congratulations. The joy of pregnancy did not bring much good luck to Wang. This morning, Wang went to the kitchen to help with work, but was harassed by his wife Chen. Chen Shi had always disliked the soft and weak fox-like appearance of this third younger brother and sister, and deliberately asked her to go to the river to fetch water and fill the water tank at home. In the past, the water tank at home was always full. Yang Laosan was afraid that his two sister-in-law would run away from his own wife. He got up before dawn to pick good water and chop good firewood. When his brothers all got up, he followed them down to work. And today, it's Guyu. There is a custom in Gushi village that on the day of Guyu, villagers should go to the ground to work at the hour of Yin to show respect for the saying, rain produces 100 grains, praying for smooth weather throughout the year and a bountiful autumn harvest. Yang Laosan didn't have time to carry water and chop firewood, so he followed his father and brother to work on the ground, leaving the water tank empty. Wang heard her sister-in-law asking her to fetch water, but she refused. The doctor said that she was only 3 months pregnant, which was a time of unstable fetal appearance and top priority. The child that I and my husband waited for a full 10 years to conceive naturally wanted to take good care of. Before, she could do even more tiring work than carrying water. But today, for the first time in 10 years, she refused the job assigned to her by her sister-in-law for the sake of her unborn child. She calmly explained the reason to her two sisters-in-law, hoping they could understand. Unexpectedly, those two sister-in-law not only didn't understand her, but also said that she didn't want to work just because she was pregnant. They said that when they were pregnant, they weren't so delicate. Why did she have to confess like a wealthy family owner when she got pregnant? The two sister-in-law colluded in a stalemate, and as you spoke, I became more and more excited and even started to move. Wang was afraid that they would harm her child in her belly, so she instinctively reached out and waved away their push. Unexpectedly, this action immediately angered Chen, thinking that Wang dared to hit her back and pushed her to the ground with one force. When Wang first arrived at the Yang family, she fell seriously ill and her bones were already weak. It was fortunate that she could conceive a child. With this push, Wang sat down on the ground and let out a painful "ah." The original owner who was feeding the chicken heard his mother's cry and immediately put down his work and ran over. As soon as she ran over, she saw her mother lying on the ground rolling, with blood flowing under her body. Her two aunts were looking at her mother with a surprised expression on their faces, and they didn't step forward to help her. The expression on Auntie's face was richer, and the panic in her eyes couldn't be ignored no matter what. Seeing this scene, the original owner still has something unclear. They must have bullied her mother, pushed her to the ground, and finally got pregnant. How could they be so vicious? The original owner was stimulated by the blood all over his mother's body, and hatred surged in his heart. She let out a roar and rushed over like a small shell, exerting the greatest force in her life to push Chen Shi to the ground. Chen did not expect the usually submissive little wild seed to dare to attack her, gritting its teeth and wishing to tear the original owner alive. The second daughter-in-law, Sun Shi, was instinctively surprised when she saw her sister-in-law being pushed down by a child. She then unconsciously raised her lips and pretended to push the original owner, educating her sister-in-law about his lack of understanding. Ms. Wu, the old lady of the Yang family in the room, heard the commotion and came out to see the situation. She saw her sister-in-law fighting and struggling together. The eldest wife on the ground caught a glimpse of her mother-in-law coming out of the house, rolling and howling on the ground. That's even more tragic than losing my parents. And the third wife also lay rolling on the ground, with blood still under her body. The recovered loser stared fiercely at the Chen and Sun families. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Malicious Calculation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Malicious Calculation. The old lady of the Yang family's face darkened. My sister-in-law would play around a few times on weekdays, but she would turn a blind eye and now she's causing a lot of trouble. If the third person comes back and finds out that the child in his wife's womb is gone, or that it was the fault of his sister-in-law and sister-in-law, he may cause trouble. It's not that she feels sorry for the child in her belly. She already has 3 grandsons, 2 granddaughters, and the lost money she picked up, so she can be considered a family full of grandchildren. She doesn't expect the child in Wang's belly to be male or female. For her, not being able to give birth saved her a mouthful of food. What's important now is not to let the third party know that the miscarriage was caused by those 2 sister-in-law. After all, most of the family's work still relies on the strong, obedient, and filial third party. Mrs. Yang pondered for a moment and immediately scolded the Chen family. Chen quickly got up from the ground, shaking the dust and standing aside with her head down. Mrs. Yang summoned 2 granddaughters and asked them to drag the original owner into the big house, keep an eye on the original owner, and prevent her from coming out. Then he instructed the 2 daughter-in-law to drag the third daughter-in-law into the ear room next to the chicken coop, saying that it was unlucky for a woman to have a bloody baby, and even more unlucky for a miscarriage, so she could only stay in the ear room. As soon as the sister-in-law heard this, they looked at each other and knew that their mother-in-law wanted to clean them up from this matter. They immediately went forward and did as their mother-in-law said. Mrs. Yang walked calmly to the edge of the water tank, picked up a water ladle, scooped up some residual water from the tank, and splashed it onto the blood-stained area. Soon, the blood flowed into the small stinky ditch next to the yard with the water. Mrs. Yang's eyes were cold and she glanced at the big house. The sound of a little wild seed came from the room. She was clamoring to come out. Mrs. Yang rolled her eyes. Coincidentally, taking this opportunity to solve these two things that are obstructing her eyes, and at the same time, to win over the wooden heart of the third person, killing two birds with one stone. The original owner, who was locked in the room, had a mix of hatred and anxiety in her heart. She tried several times to rush out to see her mother, but was blocked by two cousins. The original owner was already the youngest in the family, and due to years of insufficient food and clothing, his body suffered from severe malnutrition. Being able to push Auntie down was already the result of her hatred in her heart, and with Chen feeling a bit dazed at the time, she finally got her hand. Now, two taller and stronger cousins are blocking the door here, and she will be pushed back a few times after charging. On the last attempt, she charged fiercely and was also pushed fiercely. She stumbled a few times and the back of her head hit the corner of the wooden table in the room, then rolled to the ground. Her head was fatally injured, and the original owner died. Young Jinfan arrived. Young Jinfan reached out to touch the wound on the back of his head, and there was still blood flowing out, but it was showing signs of improvement. The speed of bleeding gradually slows down, and the blood is slowly drying up. Based on her years of medical experience, it should be because of her arrival that a part of the wound has healed inside. Otherwise, if she continues to be injured in the same way as before, she is afraid of passing through and dying. Young Jinfan's black and white eyes were filled with a strong coldness, and his gaze swept over the pants legs of the two girls who had been tapped for sleep. Although their clothes are all patched, they are much better than what she wears. She stood up with her hands on the ground, walked up to them and squatted down. Her small hands tore hard at the pants on their calves. Sting. She tore off all 4 pieces of pants like the same method. She pulled the pants into long strips and carefully wrapped them around her head before getting up to open the door and take a look at the original owner's mother. Oh no, it's her mother now. As soon as I reached for the door latch, there was a faint noise coming from outside the door. Young Jinfan stopped moving and observed the outside through the crack of the door, raising her ears to listen carefully. Be gentle and don't let that little bastard hear you. Don't worry, mother. Hehe and Hehe are watching inside. There hasn't been much movement in my son's room for a while, and I'm afraid even that little wild seed won't be able to shout anymore. If she makes a fuss, Hehe and Hehe will keep her tidy and obedient. Stupid thing, is what my old lady is talking about is whether she's making a fuss or not. If it weren't for you, a troublemaker, why would I still need my old lady's help? It's getting late, and my son, who works in the fields, may be finishing work. If someone finds out about this, even the spittle of those big girls and daughter-in-law who love to chew their tongues can drown me. Where should my old lady's face be? Should I become a person in the Yang family? Hey, what my mother said is, look at my daughter-in-law's brain. We're going now. Fortunately, the river is not far from our house either. My second daughter-in-law needs to use some strength to raise her legs a little higher to prevent blood from getting on the ground. Hey, great sister-in-law. Mom, I'll trouble you to deal with the blood stains in your ear. We'll be back soon. Are you using your stupid thing to explain this to me? Hurry up, throw the person into the river, come back together and discuss our words. When your father and his companions come back from the ground, we will tell Lao San about this matter. As for that little bastard. Humph, my Lao Yang family has been raising her for 7 years. If she knows how to be grateful, she should swallow this matter for me. If she is a white-eyed wolf and doesn't agree, she will be beaten to her death. Hehe, there's still a way for me. Today my mother protects us, and tomorrow we will treat her as our own mother to show filial piety. Oh no, she's even closer than our own mother. Alright, you're the one with a sweet mouth. Go and get back. Hey, good girl. Watching them carrying people briskly away, Mrs. Yang withdrew her gaze and glanced at the door of the large room, feeling something was amiss in her heart. Why is it so quiet inside? Are those two dead girls slacking off? Mrs. Yang frowned, afraid of any problems, and walked towards the big house. Young Jinfan quickly shrank to the side of the door as soon as Mrs. Yang turned around. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. She scanned around and saw a small wooden stool not far from the door. It had been several years and had not been painted before. Even under the conditions of the Yang family, they couldn't afford to paint. It would be great if they could afford it. She quickly picked up the small stool with one hand, holding her breath and concentrating like a cold killer, her eyes fixed on the changes in the corner of the door, calculating time and force. Mrs. Yang walked outside the door and pushed it with her hand, only to find that it couldn't be opened. A door bolt was installed inside the door, and she attached her ear to listen, but there was still no movement. Mrs. Yang kicked the door with her foot raised and crossed her waist, cursing outside, "Two dead girls, are you slacking off? Why don't you open the door? Are you asking me to invite you? Be quick with your movements. If you don't open the door again, neither of you will eat dinner tonight. Feeding chickens to pigs is more cost-effective than feeding two losers." Young Jinfan reached out and took off the latch, avoiding the crack in the door. He quickly withdrew his hand and gripped the small stool in his hand. Upon hearing that the door latch had been removed, Mrs. Yang cursed and pushed the door in. "Damn girl, your skin is itching, isn't it? It's so slow to open the door, I think I've been hitting less in the past 2 days." Seeing Mrs. Yang walk in, "I haven't noticed anything unusual inside the house yet." Young Jinfan's breath froze, he focused on the back of her head, gathered his strength, and was ready to go. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Yaoxiang Youth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Yaoxiang Youth. Right now. Bang! Young Jinfan jumped up and slammed the small stool onto Empress Yang's head, causing her to fall to the ground in response. Mrs. Yang herself is not tall, and at the age of 7, Ong Jinfan is already on her shoulders. Coupled with accurate timing, she worked hard and hit with just one strike. Due to her exertion, Ong Jinfan took a few steps and her head went dizzy. She quickly reached out to support the door, but didn't fall down. When old lady Yang was stunned, Young Jinfan turned his eyes to the two sisters again, and raised his feet to look down at them. Her body is still a child, coupled with severe malnutrition and injuries, and she doesn't have much strength in her hands. These two bear kids will wake up soon, and if they wake up and find out she's not there thinking of this, Yang Jinfan grabbed the big girl's collar and threw a sharp hand knife at her neck. Fall one after another. After 2 hand knives fell, Yang Jinfan stepped out and didn't forget to open the door. She quickly walked to the pigsty and glanced at the pig groaning inside. This pig is still being worked as a laborer by her father Yang Lao-san in the town, and the little piglets are being paid for their wages. She and her mother have been taking care of this pig since it was brought home. Those people in the Yang family are lazy and used to flatter, always thinking of getting something for nothing. How could they care about whether a pig is full or not? Young Jinfan raised a sinister smile at the corner of his lips and stepped forward to remove the latch of the pigsty door, pushing it wide open. Quickly turning around, he arrived at the chicken coop and without hesitation, opened the coop door as well. From her memory onwards, she has been feeding the 4 chickens at home. The insect was caught by the mother who took her to pick it up, and some tender wild grass on the roadside was chopped up and fed. She watched the chickens grow up year after year, laying eggs, hatching chicks, being killed, boiled, and then eaten. Meat has no connection with her, even with the 3rd room. Occasionally killing a chicken, or her father sneaking into the kitchen in the middle of the night to serve her and her mother a bowl of chicken soup. Now let's go eat the fart if everyone wants it. Watching the chicken and pig happily run out of the circle, she also followed her memory and ran towards the small river not far from home. Halfway through, she picked up 2 stones of suitable size, also known as hands, and carried them in her arms, accelerating her running speed. Although the small river is not far from the Yang family, the road is difficult to walk, and there are many vegetation around, especially the Jingjiaopeng. Although there were more people walking and there was a more obvious path, the road was winding and narrow, and it was inevitable that clothes and hands would be scratched along the way. The two sister-in-law still had to carry someone and walked even slower. After going out for a while, young Jinfan quickened his pace and now caught up with them. She stopped not far from them, wanting to wait for an opportunity to move. In order to avoid being discovered by them, she chose a nearby tree with lush foliage and climbed up. Quickly climb up the tree, squat on a tree trunk, take out the stones I picked up in my arms, and take a glance at the swaying figure in front of me, ready to throw them accurately. Suddenly, a gentle breeze struck, and a faint medicinal fragrance drifted towards the nose. Young Jinfan's gaze fixed and he instantly became more alert. There are still people here. This small river is close to the Yang family, but its location is somewhat remote, and very few people come here. Especially at this time, people working in the fields are busy finishing work and returning home. Who else would come here except for those two sister-in-law? A faint medicinal fragrance once again struck, accompanied by a faint smile. This smile is extremely light, as if only for her to hear. Young Jinfan suddenly looked up and met a pair of clear eyes, with a smile on his face and a hint of exploration. He is a teenager of about 11 or 12 years old, with a slightly sickly white skin and an elegant aura emanating from his whole body. However, there is an irresistible resentment between his eyebrows and eyes. He was looking at her with great interest, his thin lips curling up with a mischievous smile. He waved gently and greeted Yang Jinfan. Yang Jinfan furrowed his brows, his face serious, and instead of greeting, he glared back at him with a warning in his eyes. Then, she turned her head and stared at the three people in front, without further delay, throwing the two stones in her hand fiercely. Ah! Ah! Who is it? The two sister-in-law were busy on their way, feeling the most anxious and completely unprepared. A person was hit in the bend of their foot by a stone and knelt down in pain. Another person was hit on the forehead by a stone, instinctively releasing the hand that was dragging Wang, covering their own forehead, and screamed, "Oh, oh, oh." Sun always felt uneasy in her heart, as she rubbed her leg, which was hurt by the stones, and looked around. This look is amazing. The little wild seed from the third family was standing behind her, looking at her with a half-smile. Startled, she widened her eyes and was about to remind her sister-in-law, but unexpectedly, Yang Jinfan rushed to her side, raised his hand, and swung it towards her neck. She rolled her eyes and fell unconscious. The eldest wife, Chen Shi, only covered her forehead and didn't notice anything wrong around her. Young Jinfan walked around behind her and once again raised his hand to fiercely chop down. Chen lost consciousness and plunged forward. Before she could fall on her third wife, Young Jinfan kicked her hard and pushed her back. Young Jinfan kicked Chen Shi further away like kicking a dead dog. She crouched down to examine Wang's condition. Wang has lost consciousness and is in a coma. It should be the pain that has caused her eyebrows to furrow, and her pale face seems to be about to die in the next second. Despite this, she desperately covered her lower abdomen with both hands, trying to protect her child. Unfortunately, the child is really gone. Young Jinfan pulled up one of her hands and held on to her pulse, her already solemn expression becoming increasingly ugly. Her mother's body is in great deficit. She fell seriously ill many years ago and has not recovered yet. For many years, in a dirty place like the Yang family, I couldn't eat enough or wear warm clothes, and my already weak body was hollowed out over time. Now, coupled with slippery tires, my body is extremely cold. If left untreated, I'm afraid more misfortune than good fortune. Young Jinfan extended his finger and poked her mother a few times, sealing the acupoint and temporarily stopping the bleeding. Then he glanced at Chen, who had fainted, and took off her clothes, tightly wrapping them around his mother. She tried to pull her mother onto her own back. She was able to clean up her 2 children and Mrs. Yang from the Yang family, and then come here all the way to clean up her 2 old ladies, which was already a hard support. If she were still the 27-year-old, energetic military doctor from her past life, this fuss would only be considered as itching. But she is only a 7-year-old child now, and she is also a severely malnourished child with a heavy head injury. After all this fuss, she had no strength left. She tried twice but failed, and was so anxious that she broke out in a cold sweat. The boy watching the play from the tree had already come down and stood behind her to observe her for a long time. The young man saw her anxious and helpless appearance, and knew that the woman's situation should be very bad, and a hint of unbearable feeling rose in his heart. He spoke up and said, "How about I help you?" End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Preparing to pull back a game. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Preparing to pull back a game. The clear voice pounded against young Jinfan's eardrums, and she lifted her head to look at him, her eyes still guarded. The young man quickly explained, "Don't worry, I didn't mean to harm her. I really just wanted to help you. Your mother's condition is terrible, and if she's not treated, it might be more or less unfortunate." Young Jinfan still looked at him without saying a word. The young man glanced at the dying woman and spoke again, "I know you. You are young Jinfan, the daughter of Yang Laosan from the Yang family. This is your mother. I can save her, believe me." Young Jinfan still stared at him, but his hand grabbed the corner of the boy's clothes and struggled to spit out 4 words. "Please, save her." After speaking, he fell forward in a daze with both eyes. "Hey!" The young man quickly grabbed her with his eyes and hands, and quickly took out a small and delicate brocade pouch from his arms. He took out 2 pieces of ginseng slices from inside, one of which was fed to young Jinfan's mouth. "Take it, save your life," he said, turning around. He stuffed another piece into the mouth of his 3rd wife Wang. "White jade, white velvet." He called out 2 names in a low voice, and 2 masked men in black appeared in front of them. "Young master. You 2 will carry her mother and daughter back to your adoptive father's place, and I will be there soon." "Yes." A man in black picked up his 3rd wife and placed her on his back, but disappeared in the blink of an eye. Another man in black was about to step forward and carry young Jinfan. "Wait a minute." Young Jinfan spoke out, and the man in black stopped his steps and stood aside. Young Jinfan, supported by a young man, finally stabilized her figure. With a 100-year-old ginseng slice in her mouth, she was given some strength, and her eyes regained some clarity. "Thank you. Thank you." She weakly said, "Thank you," and looked up at the boy. "However, I need to go to Li Zheng's house first." Young Jinfan explained the reason to the young man. She remembered that this young man was the adopted son of Gu Lang in the east of the village. The soil near the small river is loose and fertile, suitable for vegetation growth. Gu Langzhong bought a piece of land here specifically for cultivating white jade peonies. Before and after the grain rain, there is abundant precipitation, and all the peonies are open. The boy appeared here, probably to take care of the peonies. When he heard some movement outside the flower garden, he came out to check and met her. He wanted to send her and her mother to Gu Langzhong for treatment, and she was grateful for this kindness. However, she still has a tough battle to fight and needs to take advantage of it to run to Li Zheng's home now. Otherwise, she couldn't explain everything clearly, not only couldn't save her mother, but also implicated her. The handsome boy frowned and felt that it was still inappropriate. He worried and said, "Your head injury cannot withstand such turmoil. In my opinion, it's better to treat it first." The child picked up by the Yang family has always been timid and cowardly, always obedient to the words of several cousins. When others bully and scold her, she only silently bears it and never fights back. He had only seen her from afar before, and the girl's eyes were all timid. How could he have such a determined and thoughtful expression now? Although he didn't know exactly what happened to the Yang family and forced her to fight back, he couldn't bear to see the injured person trampling on his body like this. In the face of all things, isn't life more important? Young Jinfan knew he was kind-hearted, but she still shook her head firmly. She had to do this, and she had to do it. The child in my mother's belly cannot be lost for nothing, and she doesn't want to wait. It's never too late for a gentleman to seek revenge, and she's not a gentleman. Thank you for your concern. I'm fine. Young Jinfan looked at the worried eyes of the young man and thanked him again. Due to the presence of ginseng film, his voice was hoarse, forming a sharp contrast with the young man's clear voice. She has a clear idea in her mind. In the past, if a patient said that, she would definitely be the first to jump out and curse at the patient's nose. A sick patient, what can he do to show off? My mother, who claims to be a skilled hand, dares not speak up and say that you are okay. You, who just returned from the gates of hell, should just stay honest. Now that she's on her own, she's also showing off. The young man still felt uneasy, but he no longer stopped him. Since you insist on doing so, I won't stop you, but I have a request for Bai Rong to give you a ride. Don't worry, I will ask Bai Rong to find a deserted place to put you down so that you can save some energy and do what you want to do. Given her current state, it is feared that the two village women would wake up before she could call them in. He looked at the little girl with a hint of determination in her black and white eyes, knowing that no matter how hard he tried to persuade her, it was better to fulfill her. Young Jinfan originally wanted to refuse, but the young man had already called Bai Rong to squat in front of her before she spoke. She could only swallow the words that were on her lips back into her stomach, gave him a grateful glance, and attached her white furry back, then disappeared like a gust of wind. The boy stared at the direction they were leaving for a long time before taking his gaze back. He turned his head to look at his two sisters-in-law who had fainted, his brows furrowed so much that he could even catch a fly. After pondering for a moment, he restrained his disgust and stepped forward, giving both of them another hand knife before getting up and leaving. When Bai Rong arrived not far from Li Zheng's home with Yang Jinfan on his back, he caught a glimpse of a group of people walking ahead, holding agricultural tools. The villagers who were working in the fields had finished their work and returned home. Yang Jinfan immediately signaled to Bai Rong to put her down and whispered, "Thank you." Bai Rong shook his head and said he didn't need to thank you, but he quickly dodged and disappeared. Young Jinfan sorted out her emotions in place, reached out to pinch her thigh, and rushed towards the direction of the villagers. "Help, help! Uncle Li Zheng, you're killing someone. Woo woo woo." Young Jinfan cried and shouted, and the mournful cries drew the villagers back one after another. Everyone was surprised. Isn't this the child picked up by the third member of the Yang family? This child is timid and usually doesn't go out. When he goes out, he just goes down to the ground to help with work. He is quite sensible. What happened today? As young Jinfan approached, the iron pillar of the Li family saw her pale as a ghost, with a cloth strip tied to her head and blood on it. Her eyes were crying red. He quickly walked up and asked, "Fan, what's wrong with you? Is someone bullying you?" Young Jinfan cried uncontrollably, with bloodstains on his clothes and sobs, and uttered a sentence intermittently. "Uncle. Our family has been attacked by criminals. He beats milk, milk. Milk now. Now." As young Jinfan spoke, she stopped talking and only bit her lips tightly, tears streaming down her face. Li Taizhu instantly understood. This is something big happening in Yang's family. Old Lady Yang has been beaten and her life and death are unpredictable. Don't be afraid, Miss Fan. With Uncle here, Uncle will accompany you to Li Zheng's house and will give you milk to seek justice. Li Taizhu patted Yang Jinfan's thin shoulder, handed the farming tools in his hand to the nearby farmers, and asked them to help bring them back to his own home. He then led young Jinfan towards Li Zheng's house. When everyone saw that something big was happening in the Yang family, they all quickened their pace and wanted to go home quickly to put away agricultural tools and wash their hands, and come out to watch the excitement. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Discovering Something Wrong. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Discovering Something Wrong. At the same time, Mr. Yang and the three brothers of the Yang family realized something was wrong as soon as they returned home. The doors of the chicken and pig pens were wide open, and by this time, there was no smoke rising from the kitchen. The whole yard was quiet, with a faint smell of blood permeating the air. Several big men were filled with doubts and unease in their hearts. Yang's father was stunned for a few seconds, then stomped his hoe hard on the ground and turned around to coldly glance at his own sons. Breaking through, he cursed, "Look at what kind of lazy person you've married yourself. When has it been? This kitchen is cold and bustling. Why, wait until I finish my work and come back to cook and serve a few of her." The sons looked at each other and were inexplicably scolded by their own father, feeling a bit bewildered. Mr. Yang was the first to react and walked towards the big house. As he walked, the yin-yang monster said, "Is it okay for her to be a mother for the first time in 10 years? Yang Laosan frowned and said in a deep voice, "What does Big Brother mean by this? Ajiao is not the only one at home. Oh, why is third brother so anxious?" "I didn't say anything, Big Brother." "Big Brother, are you just talking about Ajiao? My third brother can hear it." "Hey, third brother, what you're saying is so unpleasant. I didn't name you by name, why are you in a hurry? You. All right. When is it? The two of you still have thoughts about arguing with me. Do you still think that I, Mr. Yang, have not lost enough face?" Both brothers were silenced by Yang's father's roar. Yang Laoda gave Yang Laosen a sideways glance, a provocative smile on his lips, and his dark face was filled with pride. Yang Laosan's eyes widened and he stared straight at Yang Laoda. His fist clenched a little more, wishing to knock him down with one punch. Don't think he doesn't talk much and doesn't argue with his brothers on weekdays, he doesn't know that his big brother has been plotting against his wife. His Ajiao is even more delicate than a flower, and his older brother immediately remembers her because he picked her up. His mother asked him to marry Ajiao, and his older brother envied him for holding on to a beautiful woman, so he has been targeting his wife and his wife everywhere for many years. His sister-in-law really doesn't know anything. A man from his own family has been thinking about someone else's wife for 10 years, and she still thinks that this man is honest and towards his family. It's not good anymore. Our chicken and pig are gone. Yang Laosi didn't care about the open and hidden arrows between his brothers, and ran straight to the pigsty to see what was going on. Suddenly, he let out a roar, which also pulled back Yang Laosan's thoughts. After Yang Laosi exclaimed, several big men from the Yang family finally realized that Yang Laosan rushed into the third house, where there was nothing inside. "Afan, Afan. Ajiao, Ajiao." For shouts, but no one responded. Yang Laosan hurriedly rushed out of the room and said, "Big brother and second brother, is big sister-in-law and second sister-in-law at home? Is big sister and second sister-in-law at home?" Mr. Yang glanced at the panicked Mr. Yang and didn't speak. He raised his hand to push the open door, and the smell of blood rushed towards his face. The tall and sturdy man was also frightened and trembled. His mind briefly went blank for a while before he regained consciousness and realized that the person lying in the pool of blood seemed to be his own mother. Damn it! With a cry of surprise, several big men approached and were startled when they saw the person the boss was helping. Their mother and father were covered in blood, their eyes tightly closed, and their face turned white like a ghost. "Hurry up, go and invite Dr. Gu." With a growl from Yang's old and rich voice, Yang Laosi regained his senses and quickly ran out to invite Dr. Gu. Looking inside, he realized that both granddaughters were lying on one side. Yang's father stepped forward and placed his fingers under the noses of the two girls, feeling angry. "Diya area, wake up quickly." Father Yang shook for a long time before the two sisters woke up. Due to the two hand knives Yang Jinfan struck at their necks with great force, the two girls, no matter how horizontal, were still two children. When they heard a voice calling out to them, they could wake up but could not move, feeling dizzy. Their necks seemed to have been hacked by someone, and even their backs seemed to have fallen apart. "Daya area, what happened at home? Why are your two sisters lying here? What about your mother?" Father Yang asked a series of questions. The two sisters had just woken up, and their brains were still buzzing. How could they answer? They didn't utter a word for a long time. Yang's father was so anxious that he was sweating and didn't curse out loud, but he felt extremely disgusted in his heart. After all, she is a female child. A loser who can't carry her shoulders or carry her hands is not as honest as a male child. The two sisters finally recovered and murmured, "Fan. Jinfan." Mr. Yang leaned close to his ear and heard two words, "Jinfan," in his subtle voice. "Yes, where's the sale girl from the third family? Why don't you see her?" Third. Yang Laosan searched around the yard outside the house, but couldn't find anyone. He saw some blood stains in the ear room next to the chicken coop, his heart pounding violently, and a sense of unease spread, causing a chill all over his body. Hearing his father calling him, he stumbled back into the room and said, "Dad, what's wrong?" Yang's father gave him a cold glance and spoke in a very unpleasant tone, "What's wrong? What else can we do? There's a big problem at home, where's your fangirl?" Yang hesitated and said, "Dad, I couldn't find it." "You father can't even find her, can't she fly?" Yang's father is angry. On weekdays, he would have looked down on the money-losing goods he picked up. If it weren't for her obedience, he would have kicked her out of the Yang family long ago. Now that something big happened at home, where did this dead girl hide? Yang Laosan knew that his father was going to vent his anger on his daughter, and he was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot. "Dad, our family has been kidnapped by villains, isn't Afan?" This blurted-out sentence startled Yang Laosan himself. Has his family Afan really been kidnapped? Upon hearing these words, Mr. Yang fell into silence. Before he could speak, he heard a commotion outside the house. Mr. Yang ran into the house and said to his father, "Dad, the neighborhood is coming, and the sale girl from the third family is also here." "What's going on?" Yang's father frowned. When he returned home, he couldn't see anything. Two of them were unconscious, one was injured, and now the most timid one appeared, bringing along a group of people. What exactly is going on? Upon hearing his daughter's return, Yang Laosan quickly ran out. "Afan!" Yang Laosan shouted. "Dad!" Yang Jinfan saw his father rushing out of the house, but he didn't care about the injury on his head. He threw himself into his arms and cried as he pounced. "Dad! Afan is afraid, someone is beating his mother. Her mother is gone." Sobbing, Yang Jinfan cried uncontrollably and said a sentence intermittently. Boom! Yang Laosan's mind was blank from this sentence, and it took him a while to recover. His gaze was fixed on Yang Jinfan, who was crying uncontrollably, and he murmured, "Afan, what are you saying? Who is gone?" "Your mother is gone." "Yes. Yes. Mother. The child in her belly." Before he could finish speaking, Yang Jinfan's eyes flickered and he fainted, falling into Yang Laosan's arms. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Asking for money. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Asking for money. Afan. Yang Laosan was still in shock, but was startled again. He was completely disoriented and looked around, only to see a handsome young man standing in the crowd at a glance. Gu Xiaolang, please help Afan. Yang Laosan's throat roared, instantly attracting the attention of the villagers, and the young man had to take a step forward. Yang Laosan trembled and knelt in front of the young man, holding the unconscious young Jinfan in his arms. The simple and honest man's pleading voice even had a crying tone. Gu Xiaolang, please help Afan. Help her. Yang Laosan carefully hugged the unconscious young Jinfan in his arms, his hands not knowing where to put them, staring at the blood band tied to her head, his heart twitching. The young man's eyes were filled with sympathy, but he didn't take the initiative to help with the treatment. Instead, he calmly glanced at the villagers around him and quickly looked at the young brothers. The young man hesitated and furrowed his brow, looking embarrassed. After a moment of silence, he spoke up and said, "Uncle Yang, your daughter's situation is very dangerous. It's not that I didn't save her, but that she's seriously injured. If you want to save her life, you need 100-year-old ginseng." This. Yang Laosan understood that as a century-old senior citizen, his young family had to pay a large sum of money to save the life of his family's Afan. Yes, money. His parents hold the family's savings and expenses, they have money. Yang Laosan's eyes suddenly lit up, and he gently laid young Jinfan flat on the ground, kneeling in front of his father. He kowtowed and knocked loudly, causing a slight vibration on the ground. Several bangs knocked down his forehead, causing blood to flow down his cheeks. "Dad, Dad. Please, Dad, give me some money to save Afan." The tall and burly man, with a rough voice, knelt humbly and begged on the ground, his face covered in blood, and everyone present was moved by it. Yang Laosan really loves this child he picked up. However, except for the Yang family. Yang's father looked coldly at Yang Laosan kneeling on the ground, and it took him a long time to utter a word. "Our family is poor, and your mother's life and death are uncertain. When Dr. Gu comes, we don't know what to say. We need money both inside and outside the house, so where is there any extra money to buy old ginseng for her? Third, it's not because my father is cruel. Think about it, our family is already so poor that we can't afford it. She is still a daughter. When your husband and wife insisted on bringing her back to raise her, didn't your mother and I still agree? Now, when Dr. Gu comes to look at your mother, he will also look at her. The rest depends on her nature." Yang Laosan's heart shook as he didn't know what to say anymore. All he had in his mind was a series of questions shouting. Big brother's child Dia and second brother's child Arya are also daughters, aren't they? Dia and Arya can even go to see a doctor if they get hot. Why does his Afan have to give in to fate even if he breaks his head? Afan was indeed picked up, but he was also the only child under his knee for many years. He, as a father, can't protect his own child. Is he feeling helpless? "Dad!" A subtle cry came out, pulling Yang Laosan back to reality. The unconscious little girl in his arms became more conscious and uttered a sentence intermittently. "Daddy, I'm fine. There's no need to treat it, save my mother." After speaking, he tilted his head and became unconscious again. Yang Laosan's heart seemed to be lifted and thrown down, causing him to gasp for breath in pain. This is the child he has raised for 7 years. In his heart, Afan is the biological child of him and his wife. Thinking of this, Yang Laosan gritted his teeth and said, "Dad, Afan is my own flesh and blood. Now her mother's life and death are unknown. If anything happens to her again, I don't want to live. My father and mother have been holding hands with my grandfather for many years, and my third son earns food money during busy farming hours, as well as money for going out to work during idle farming hours. However, a lot of it has been handed over to our family. My daughter now needs money to save her life, and I don't believe that our family really can't even take out a penny of extra money. If Dad can't bear to take it, my third son can go find it himself." After speaking, let go of young Jinfan, who was unconscious in his arms, and pretended to walk towards the second old house. Yang's father was so scared that he quickly stepped forward to block the way, pointing at Yang Lao San's nose and cursing. "You unfilial thing, have I ever said I won't treat that girl who is losing money? Your mother and I still lie on the side, knowing whether we are alive or dead. You're good, no matter what I do, you're all focused on two outsiders and saying, don't want to live. You scare me. If you don't want to live, you should go die. You think if your wings are hard, you can still scare me." Yang Laosan ignored Yang's father's obstruction and wanted to go into the house. Yang's father stopped him in front of him and was pushed away by him. Mr. Yang couldn't stop Mr. Yang, who was about to enter the house, and gestured to the boss standing beside him to stop him. He then sat down on the ground and started rolling around. "Oh, no reason. This unfilial son, this wicked beast. How could he attack me for a lost money he picked up? Why did I give birth to such a heartless thing? Oh, my life is so hard." Mr. Yang stepped forward and hugged Mr. Yang tightly, preventing him from entering the house. He was surprised to hear that his father had even used the technique of rolling around like a woman. Third, listen to Big Brother's advice. If the child is gone, you can take it again, but our father only has one. Our mother doesn't even know if she's alive or dead, we need to care about her at least, don't we? When Mr. Yang said these words, not to mention that Mr. Yang couldn't bear to listen, even the villagers who were coming with him to watch the play felt harsh. What, the child's life is not fate, but the lives of parents are greater than heaven. However, although the words may sound a bit unpleasant, they are still being taken seriously. Since ancient times, filial piety has always been the top priority. How could there be a principle of leaving one's own father and mother alone and only focusing on one's own children? Besides, she's still a girl picked up. Yang's third son, you have to have a good conscience when it comes to being a good person. It's not easy for your parents to pull you up with a lot of feces and urine. Don't be too stubborn either. Everyone knows you feel guilty without children, but it depends on fate. Yes, third brother. We are all poor families, and we can't even fill our stomachs on a daily basis. How can we still get sick? Not to mention being a 100-year-old ginseng, even the medicine we need to take for a headache and a fever will drain our financial resources. Who said it's not like this? In my opinion, this girl is just lucky and thin. Third, don't take it too seriously. Just follow your father's advice and see her nature. Father Yang cries harder when he sees someone talking for him. He just doesn't give the unfilial son the chance to go in and get money. He is the final say of the family. Who can help him? Yang Laosan was imprisoned and couldn't break free for a while. When he heard the villagers urging him to give up saving the child, he felt a chill all over his body, except for the blood flowing down his cheek from his broken forehead. You can't say such things. Heaven has the virtue of good life, and this girl is obedient and filial. She should be a lucky person. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Maintenance of the Doctor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Maintenance of the Doctor. A refined, clear and full of vitality voice passed through the crowd, causing them to turn back frequently and instantly attracting everyone's attention. The person coming is Gu Langzhong from the east end of the village. Gu Langzhong is an outsider who has been in Gushi village for 8 years. With his excellent medical skills, he quickly established himself in the village, hung up a medical license, and opened a shop to treat people. Although it is unclear where Gu Langzhong learned from, everyone admires his ability to revive with skillful hands, and his medical fees are collected fairly. He is a famous doctor from all over the country. The most amazing thing is that Gu Langzhong's elegant demeanor, even wearing coarse linen clothes, exudes a noble aura, like being exiled to earth. Unfortunately, at the age of 20.6 or 7, he lost his first wife and did not remarry. He adopted an adopted son to live together. After experiencing the trials and tribulations of life, even though he should be young and talented, he looks no different from a middle-aged man. Although his background was miserable, his reputation was not low, and no one would ever mock or underestimate him because of it. On weekdays, Gu Longzhong is rarely at home. Most of the time, he goes out for consultations, and everything at home is taken care of by his adopted son. Today, he happened not to be invited to see someone from another village. When everyone saw the doctor coming, they quickly fell silent and quickly made way for a path. Gu Longzhong was not humble either. He nodded slightly to everyone, saying hello and then walked forward. Gu Longzhong walked calmly, not as if he had died and was about to go to the emergency department. He was so calm that people thought he was taking a walk. Everyone was anxious for the young family lady who had knocked her head, and Yang Laosi, who was following behind Gu Lang, was even more anxious. He followed behind the doctor all the way, feeling extremely anxious and hesitant to speak up and urge him, so he was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot. When I went to invite Gu Longzhong, I saw that he was not in a good mood. He dared not say more. Now that he has just arrived at the doorstep and seen such a scene again, I can imagine how unhappy Gu Longzhong is in his heart at this moment. As he passed by Mr. Yang, he quickly signaled with his eyes to shut up, and Mr. Yang finally stopped his deafening splashing sound. Gu Longzhong walked up to the young man and didn't say anything. He only glanced at him briefly before preparing to squat down to examine young Jinfan's injuries. Before his waist was halfway bent, someone nearby reached out a dark hand to stop him. "Hey, Dr. Gu, my mother is lying inside the house. Please go inside and save my mother's life." Mr. Yang glanced at young Jinfan lying on the ground, his eyes disdainful and disgusted. A small wild seed, a loser, and also worthy of medical treatment. Pooh, even if she dies, he thinks she dirties the place. Gu Longzhong lowered his head to look at the hand that was blocking him, then turned his head to look at the owner of the hand, his eyes almost overflowing with coldness. Mr. Yang caught a glimpse of Gu Longzhong's gaze and was so scared that he quickly withdrew his hand. He didn't dare to say more, feeling a chill in his back. Gu Longzhong squatted down as if he hadn't heard Mr. Yang speaking. He gently rolled up his sleeves, extended two fingers with distinct joints, and placed them on young Jinfan's pulse, closing his eyes to examine carefully. "Don't worry, the auspicious child has his own destiny, and it's not a big deal." This sentence was spoken to Yang Laosan, as well as to those villagers. The people who advised Yang Laosan to give up his child just now are all blushing and have been slapped in the face. They all say that the daughter's wealth is not worth saving, but she is lucky and has her own natural beauty, and the blessings are profound. A light and flowing sentence unconsciously corrected the name of young Jinfan, a girl that everyone despised. Subsequently, he opened the medicine box he had brought with him, took out a delicate small sachet, opened the sachet, and took out a piece of something to stuff into young Jinfan's mouth. "Take out the silver needle bag again, take out a few needles and prick them onto the girl's body, then get up and walk into the room. After a stick of incense, take off the needle." Without looking back, Dr. Gu left a sentence and entered the room. Although his tone was so peaceful that it made people feel an invisible sense of oppression. Yes. The people outside were stunned for a moment, only to realize that the words were not meant for them, but for the young man and his family when they heard a childish voice. Li Taizhu can't stand watching from the side anymore. The people of the Yang family are just bullying third brother and being obedient. Just Li Zheng didn't say a word. Even if he cared about Yang San-gu and Fanya, it would be of no use. After all, his situation in the Li family is on par with that of Yang Sange in the Yang family. He is too gentle to help Yang Sange at all. Being able to invite Li Zheng to the Yang family is already the only thing within his ability to help. Standing in front of the crowd, Li Zheng felt a sense of frustration and had just finished his work in the field and returned home. Before he could even take a bite of his meal, he was invited to the Yang family. If it's just other trivial matters, it's still a matter of life and death. He had to come over first with exhaustion and hunger to deal with it. When he arrived at the Yang family, he still couldn't speak a word. The old man Yang's loud noise made him almost deaf. After a while, he had to stare outside. The villagers who came to watch the play also secretly cursed themselves in their hearts for being foolish. They didn't eat well at home and had to come and join in the fun. The fun was just like that, but they were tired and hungry, so no one took the opportunity to leave. Therefore, they felt embarrassed to leave first and had to wait to continue watching the play. The time for a stick of incense to burn quickly passed, and the young man approached and took off all the needles inserted into young Jinfan's body. He then pinched her hand and saw her slowly wake up. Young Lao San, who was stopped outside, saw his daughter wake up, and before he could express his concern, he was snatched by someone else. Li Zheng saw young Jinfan awake and quickly approached him, asking, "Fan girl, tell uncle what exactly happened. Who hit your breasts?" Upon hearing these words, young Jinfan's eyes immediately turned red. "Uncle, yes. It's the second leprosy in the village. 2 lepers." Everyone was surprised. How could it be him? "Fan girl, are you sure it's him? Are you sure you're not mistaken?" Li Zheng asked again with uncertainty, his face full of confusion and surprise, as if feeling incredulous. Young Jinfan lowered her head in contemplation, as if she was seriously reminiscing. Then she looked up at Li Zheng's gaze and nodded heavily, her 2 small hands tightly clenched due to nervousness. People really don't believe that the person who attacked Mrs. Yang would be the second leper in the village. In their image, the second leprosy is notorious for being lazy in the village, but it seems that he has never formed any grudges with anyone because everyone is too lazy to pay attention to him, and the second leprosy has not appeared in the village for a while. But looking at young Jinfan's resolute expression, everyone felt compelled to believe it. Everyone knows that the young girl picked up and raised by the 3rd son of the Yang family is the most timid. She can be intimidated by someone speaking loudly, and when bullied, she never dares to speak. She is obedient and doesn't like to speak, and is less likely to lie. Such a timid person now has such firm eyes, which shows how much courage they have mustered. Besides, the child himself has also been seriously injured, let alone being able to deceive others. Young Jinfan lowered her eyelids and quickly concealed the unnecessary and complex emotions in her eyes. She then looked up and regained her innocent appearance. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Children's Big Lies. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Children's Big Lies. Do you know why he wants to hit someone, girl? Li Zheng continued to ask, and the villagers who came to eat melons stood their ears erect one by one. Young Jinfan's eyes were already filled with tears, and his unrequited appearance was truly heart-wrenching. "Uncle, he hit people because Nai saw him playing hide-and-seek in Aunt's house." Hide-and-seek. Erlaozi has committed many things in the past, all of which were small and sneaky things. He has never heard of him clashing with others, hitting and running away. He has always been the only one who has been chased and beaten. "Fan girl, tell uncle what's going on." "Yes. He and my aunt were playing hide-and-seek in the room, and when Nai saw him, Nai scolded him. He wanted to run, but Nai wanted to hold him back and not let him run. He panicked, so he grabbed a small stool and smashed it up, and Nai fell to the ground." Sobbing. As she spoke, she probably remembered the bad scene and the little girl started crying. Everyone changed their faces upon hearing this, and Mr. Yang, who was originally inside the room, stood behind them at some point. He froze all over, his eyes blinking without blinking, clearly overwhelmed by the explosive news. Children don't know if they think it's playing hide-and-seek, but adults understand that it's not hide-and-seek, it's catch the traitor. "Girl, please be more careful. Besides him hitting Aunt Yang, how did the injury on your head come from? Was it also him who hit it?" It's him." Young Jinfan nodded and began to narrate in a soft voice. "I have been working in the vegetable field behind the yard all day today. When I turned to prepare to feed the chickens, I heard Nai cursing and asking her to catch someone. Nai was still pregnant and couldn't do heavy work, so I ran out to see what happened. And then you saw the two lepers. Yes, young Jinfan continued. I saw Lizzie trying to run out of uncle and aunt's house, and tried to hold on to him. Seeing that he couldn't break free, he picked up a stool and smashed someone, and then he ran out of the house. I quickly ran over to grab Lizzie, but when Lizzie saw that he couldn't shake me off, he gave me a hard push. I knocked my head on a hard object and passed out. Upon hearing young Jinfan's narration, Li Zheng's eyebrows furrowed into the character, Chuan. Lao Zi is a strong adult, how can you as a child stop him? What about the others? Yeah, and your two sisters, your second uncle's mother, and your mother, why are they all missing? The eldest daughter Law, Chen Shi, must have run away with the second leper. So what happened to the others? Auntie ran out of the room half naked, wanting to run with the second leprosy. Auntie and my mother were chasing them from behind, and I wanted to stop them from the front, but I didn't stop them. Auntie wanted to protect Auntie, but second sister didn't let her protect her, so the two started fighting. Auntie and Auntie were about to stop them, and the second leprosy pushed me in a hurry. Young Jinfan explained. The meaning is that your mother and your second uncle's mother have gone after the two lepers, and what about them? Yes, obedient Afan, where's your mother? Why didn't you see your mother? What happened when you told Dad that your mother was gone? Why wasn't she? Yang Laosan approached and asked, his voice trembling. If Ajiao really had any ups and downs, he wouldn't want to live anymore. When young Jinfan asked her mother, she cried even harder. Dad, Mom is still alive, but the child in Mom's belly is gone. Young Laosan seemed to have been struck by lightning, unable to regain consciousness for a long time. Why? Why didn't it happen? Well. This is so good, why did it suddenly disappear? Tell Dad, what exactly happened? I was still fine when I left this morning. Young Laosan placed his hands on young Jinfan's thin shoulders, feeling excited. Third, please don't get excited. Calm down first and let Miss Fan finish speaking. Yeah, young San-gu, please calm down first and listen to Miss Fan's account of what happened. Then you'll know what happened. Upon hearing Li Zheng and Li Tieju's words, Yang Laosan was suddenly awakened and murmured. Yes, yes. Afan knows what's going on, Afan knows. Afan, don't worry, speak slowly, Daddy is here. Yang Laosan lightly patted Yang Jinfan's back as a way of comfort. Yang Jinfan was comforted, her crying gradually subsided, and her emotions stabilized a lot. When I woke up, the doors of the chicken and pig pens were also wide open. The chicken and pig had long run out of sight, and there was no one in the yard anymore. I looked around the room and saw the eldest and second sisters lying in the corner of the room, unable to wake up no matter how they called. Milk fainted inside, covered in blood. How did you know that the child in your mother's womb is gone? Li Zheng asked again. I ran out of the yard to find my mother and second uncle's mother. On the way, I met my younger brother, who was a young man. I asked him if he had met my mother and second uncle's mother, but he said he had seen them chasing them towards the small river. Suddenly named, Gu Jun's body stiffened slightly, and his eyes were as deep as a cold pond, emitting an imperceptible coldness. Dare to pull him into the water. Oh, you're quite chubby. When young Jinfan specifically mentioned Gu Xiaolang in his words, everyone's gaze shifted from young Jinfan to Gu Jun. Li Zheng heard the three words, Xiaolang Zhong, and immediately turned his head to look at the young man. It is obvious that although I believe that Fanya is unlikely to lie and doesn't have the courage to lie about such a big matter, after all, it is related to human life and far less credible than Gu Xiaolang, one of the parties involved. Gu Xiaolang, is Miss Fan telling the truth? Gu Jun nodded, his face sincere. Returning to Li Zheng is the truth. I was about to go to the flower garden to take care of the peonies when I saw two ants from the Yang family chasing after someone on the way. The two people running in front looked like Aunt Yang and the two lepers from the village. Because someone was not dressed neatly, I didn't dare to look carefully. Later, the little girl met me and asked about their whereabouts, but her head was also injured. I accompanied her to the direction of the small river, and I really found them. So, did you bring the girl Fan and her mother back to the clinic for treatment? Master Hui, it's the younger generation. Gu Jun straightened his expression and continued speaking. I walked towards the small river with the little girl, and soon found several people lying on the ground, which were the 3 ants of the Yang family. The whereabouts of the 2 lepers were unknown, and all 3 ants fainted on the ground. I ran over to check and found that Aunt Yang and Aunt Yang were not in any serious condition, while Aunt Yang's eyes were tightly closed, her face turned pale, and there was a puddle of blood under her body. It was likely that she had undergone fetal gas, and if not treated, the consequences would be unimaginable. The little girl was so anxious that she was about to cry, so I took the initiative and carried Aunt Yang back to the clinic. After all, it's a matter of life and death, so let the little girl come to find Mr. Li Zheng. Aunt Yang and Aunt Yang are still lying on the other side of the river. Upon hearing this, Li Zheng nodded slightly, his eyebrows still furrowed. Dear friends, this book has been signed, please rest assured to enter the pit. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Destruction Traces. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Destruction Traces. Everyone present was listening attentively to young Jinfan and Gu Jun's account of the events. Some lamented the unpredictability of the world, some accused the 2 lepers of engaging in sexual activities with the Chen family, and some furrowed their brows in an attempt to gain some insight. Of course, some people grit their teeth but hide their emotions well, playfully staring at young Jinfan. Young Jinfan felt this gaze and stared back without fear, with a hint of begging in it. The young man standing not far from young Jinfan almost laughed angrily. When he lied and called his name, his face didn't even turn red. Now he knows to beg him. If it weren't for witnessing the way she dealt with the Yang family's 2 daughters-in-law, he would have been deceived by her innocent expression like they were. He is actually quite curious. He did indeed save her mother, that's right. So why is she so confident that he will definitely turn towards her? What if he doesn't want to go through this muddy water and be honest? Is she really not afraid? If Li Zheng doesn't believe it, you can bring the second sister.in.law of the Yang family back and ask them one by one. The young man nodded respectfully and answered. Upon hearing the complete and explosive news, Yang's thighs softened. Her daughter.in.law actually joined forces with outsiders to beat her mother.in.law, it's really despicable. Subsequently, overwhelming anger swept through. That dead woman dares to openly look for a wild man behind his back and bring him home. He wants to kill this slut. Second brother, come with me quickly and catch that lewd woman back. I want to kill her. Mr. Yang shouted angrily and was about to leave. Mr. Yang quickly followed suit. Uncle, I know where Auntie and Auntie are, I'll show you the way. Young Jinfan called out to Mr. Yang and struggled to get up to the ground. Hey, you're hurting your head, you can't mess around anymore. The young man spoke up to stop, showing enough concern for the patient as a doctor. Yeah, Afan, listen to Gu Xiaolang. You're so badly injured, you should be raised at home now. If you have any more ups and downs, how can you let Dad live? Yang Lao-san is really scared. The child finally managed to save his life. What should he do if something unexpected happens again? Dad, don't worry, I'm fine. It's almost dark now, so let me lead the way for Uncle and his family. I also want to ask what happened to Mother and her family. Why is the child in Mother's womb gone? If you don't go quickly, it's too late later. If Uncle and Mother wake up and run away, or it's not good for Uncle and his wife, then the child in Mother's womb will be gone for nothing. Yang Laosan stopped talking and felt a pang in his heart. The child that he and Ajiao had been hoping for 10 years was so inexplicably gone. It's impossible for heaven to say that he doesn't feel sorry for it. Okay, Dad just let you go. But you have to remember, never let yourself have any more mistakes, otherwise Dad will have no face to live. Don't worry, Dad. I will take care of myself. On the contrary, my mother is still in Gulanzhong's clinic. Follow my brother to see my mother. I need you now. Remember to bring a clean set of clothes to help my mother change. After she finished speaking, she turned her head to face the young man, gave him a deep glance, and said, Brother Xiaolang, could you please take my father to see my mother? My mother just gave birth and couldn't bear the cold, so I will ask my father to bring a clean set of clothes to change her. Could you please help me with the blood-stained clothes? I'm afraid my mother will be sad and cry too much when she wakes up. Thank you for your great kindness. Well, you go ahead. I'll take care of your mother's side. The boy blinked deeply twice to show understanding. After receiving a response, young Jinfan stood up and walked quickly to lead the way in front of Mr. Yang and a few other villagers, who couldn't help but follow with curiosity. Watching young Jinfan and the others leave, Yang Laosan quickly returned to his house and found a clean set of clothes to follow the young man to the medical shop. On the way, the young man caught a glimpse of the partially dried blood on Yang Laosan's face and spoke up. Uncle Yang, why don't you hurry to see Auntie when you arrive at the shop later? Auntie is not in any big trouble now, she's just weak and still asleep. I'll help you treat the injury on your forehead first. Ah. Oh. Yang Laosan instinctively reached out and touched his forehead, feeling some condensed blood clots. It was then that he remembered that he had just kowtowed and knocked out blood, and there should be bloodstains on his cheeks. If Ajiao saw it, she would probably be frightened. Look at his carelessness. Okay, then trouble Gu Xiaolang to win. No trouble, please have Uncle Yang sit in the main hall for a while, and I will go and collect the cleaning items. Gu Jun pointed to the chair in the main hall and gestured for Yang Laosan to sit down and rest for a while. Hey, good. Yang Laosan followed Gu Jun's signal and sat down somewhat awkwardly. Gu Jun turned to the inner room and went directly to the room where Wang was lying. Wang was still in a coma. He took out a blood-stained piece of clothing, which was the one young Jinfan had peeled off from Yang's wife and wrapped around Wang's body. White jade. I am subordinate. With Gu Jun's soft call, a man in black appeared in front of him. Take this garment and destroy it, remember to leave no trace. Yes. The man in black received the order, took the clothes, and then flashed away in the darkness. After confirming that the man in black had left, Gu Jun turned around and went to the pharmacy to get a fine cloth and trauma medicine before heading to the main hall to bandage Yang Laosan. Uncle Yang, third auntie is still asleep and is expected to wake up tonight. However, having a miscarriage has really injured her body. In addition, third auntie is already weak and needs to be carefully taken care of. We must not be subjected to any further stimulation. As for the offspring, it's probably difficult to have one. After listening to Gu Jun's words, Yang Laosan nodded repeatedly and his heart began to ache again. Thank you for Gu Xiaolang's reminder. As long as Ajiao is okay, it's okay. Gu Jun looked at Yang Laosan's lonely expression and couldn't help but think of that little girl. Even young and strong men are living in such a miserable state, and that little girl's life at the Yang family is probably even more difficult. Uncle Yang comes with me, and Aunt San is lying in the inner room. Okay. Yang Laosan followed Gu Jun to the inner room, where Wang was lying in bed. She had a pale face, furrowed brows, and was not sleeping soundly. Her hands were tightly gripping the bedding, as if trying to protect something. At the first glance of Yang Laosan, the sourness on his nose couldn't stop. Upon seeing this, Gu Jun knew that he needed to be given some time at this moment. Uncle Yang, while my aunt is still awake, could you help her change her clothes? I'll be outside in the main hall, just call me if you need anything. Thank you very much, Gu Xiaolang. I'll go and exchange it for her now. Just go ahead and keep busy. Upon hearing this, Gu Jun nodded and turned around to exit the room, while closing the door. Yang Laosen walked up to Wang's side, unable to suppress his emotions anymore, tears swirling silently in his eyes. He gently stroked Wang's cheek, and the coldness of his fingertip spread on her cheeks, causing her eyelashes to tremble slightly. If there is anything wrong, please correct it. End of this chapter.